months next week to get flyers to put up at the cemetery here.
Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
So, we're in 1 Samuel chapter 26. I did this Sunday school a little bit different this morning because I was reading this Sunday school and it kind of hit a little different for me this week because it's kind of mixed up, so we're not going to read the whole chapter together like we normally do. Because a lot of it is big words I can't pronounce. We're going to hit a couple of highlights, but I'm going to give you an idea real quick. In 1 Samuel chapter 26, there's 25 verses. We're going to look at 9 through 11 is our anchor scripture, okay? And then we're going to look at 1 through 12, 13 through 20, and 21 through 25. And this is why. In verses 1 through 12 is where we see David sparing Saul's life again. And then in verses 13 to 20 is where David will actually talk to Saul about it. And then verse 21 through 25 is where Saul's actually going to, hey, I was wrong. Kind of where they reconcile, because the first few verses have a lot of big words that I've tried to pronounce all week and can't remember all of them, but I'll give you the gist of it. Now, I've got just a few scriptures. Uncle Gene, would you look up Matthew 5, verse 44? That's Matthew chapter 5, verse 44. Mama, if you don't get no youngins, if you do, I'll read it, but if you don't, can you look up Romans 12, 17 through 19? Miss Geneva, can you give me 1 Peter chapter 2, verses 23? And then, of course, Aunt Diane, Luke 6, 27 and 28.
Say 1 Peter what now?
Yes, ma'am. 1 Peter chapter 2, verses 23. Okay. So, let me give you an idea of what I kind of got out of this. This kind of goes a little bit with us in today's times, because I looked at this as when God gives you the opportunity but not the permission. This is where we got to look at trusting in God enough not to take our own revenge. Now, this is a continuation of David's journey. In chapter 24, David had already spared Saul's life when Saul was vulnerable. Now, in chapter 26, God allows David to face the same temptation again. And that's where I'm getting at all this. Sometimes God lets us face the same temptation to see if we've learned our lesson. It happens. Now, in this scenario, it's about killing King Saul, because David could very easily do it. David sees something Abishai didn't see. Now, Abishai, you'll see, is a character that's we're going to talk about some because he plays a big part. David refused to force his way to the promised crown, meaning David refused to kill Saul to be able to become the king again, because that would have been by the wrong methods. God didn't want him to kill King Saul to be the anointed king. God anointed him as king, and he was supposed to wait his time. And sometimes in life, we can put that into play in our own life. Sometimes we see things working out to our benefit for the future, and we want to get there now. But we're not supposed to. We're supposed to take our time. Whether we're supposed to learn something from that and learn how to do what we're supposed to do or where God has us going. It's almost like, I'll give you for an example, me building a house. I've lived in an RV for 8 years, and every time I drive down my driveway, I've seen my house sitting on that hill. Now, I pray, God, whenever it's your time, God, whenever whatever you'd like. Now God's laying the foundation for me to have that house now. And we've got a rough idea of what God would lead us to do. But if I'd have forced my way to do that 2 or 3 years ago and said, no, I can go ahead and do it this way and I can do it that way and I got the means to do this and means to do that, it wouldn't have been in God's time. I do appreciate it more waiting like I have. So, that's just one scenario. Now, that's not sparing a life like David did, but that's my scenario. Because you see, an opportunity is not always God's permission. So, I'm going to read just a couple of verses right here to give you an idea, starting in chapter, do you want me to wait?
No, go ahead.
Okay, in chapter 26, and it's going to be the first 4 verses, and then we're going to skip down and start in verse 9. And the first 4 verses goes like this. Now the Ziphites came to Saul at Gibeath, and saying, is David not hiding in the hill of Hatashi, opposition Jerusalem? Then Saul arose and went down to the wilderness of Ziph, having 3,000 chosen men of Israel with him, to seek David in the wilderness of Ziph. And Saul encamped in the hill of Habachi, which is opposed Jeshem by the road. But David stayed in the wilderness, and Saul came after him into the wilderness. David therefore sent out spies and understood that Saul indeed had come. We're in 1 Samuel chapter 26, and that's for you, bud. You're welcome. Hope you enjoyed it. We're going to skip a few verses through here because there's so much. Morning. So 1 Samuel chapter 26, I just read verses 1 through 4, and now we're going to look at verses 9 through 11. Now please forgive me if I can't pronounce all these names. Okay, verse 9. But David said to Ashvi, do not destroy him, for who can stretch out his hand against the Lord's anointed and be guiltless? David said furthermore, as the Lord lives, the Lord shall strike him, or he shall go out in battle and perish. The Lord forbid that I should stretch out my hand against the Lord's anointed. But please take now the spear and the jug of water that are sitting by Saul's head, and let us go. So David took the spear and the jug by Saul's head, and they got away. And no man saw or knew it or awoke, for they were all asleep, because a deep sleep from the Lord had fallen on them. Now, what am I getting at there? We're talking about when God gives us an opportunity but not permission. David had already spared Saul in the cave. So David learned his lesson the first time that it was not his position to kill King Saul. Well, now here we are again. Saul's chasing him. This time Saul has 3,000 men going after David. David finds it out. He sends spies. They say, yep, sure enough, he's coming to kill you. God put him in a deep sleep. So, Saul is pursuing him, and the circumstances are different this time. Completely different. But the temptation is still the same. And this is why I say that. Even though David knew he was not going to kill King Saul, his curiosity, as they say, almost killed the cat. He was like, okay, let me send spies. Let's see if it's the truth. You know, sometimes in our life, we have a hard time believing something happened. Case in point. I was on live last night, and Miss Savannah popped up, and I said, hey, I was shaving my beard. She's like, and then I started shaving, and she watched. I started shaving on live. and I got it down to a goatee, kind of like Long as Christians was, and I said, you're going to have to wait to see the finished product later. And I hung it up. She had a hard time believing I was going to shave my face. Shave. But, so David sent out the spies. And sure enough, he was talking to his main head guy. And we read right there where it said in verse 10 and 11, David said, therefore, as the Lord lives, the Lord shall strike him, or his day come to die, or he shall go out to battle and perish. David had learned his lesson the first time. The temptation was there. David could kill him if he wanted to, but David didn't. But he knew he had to get Saul's attention. He knew he had to get Saul to understand, quit chasing me. I am not your enemy. How many times in your life have you been like, I don't want to go through this again. I need you to get the idea. I need you to get the picture. We don't need to run around in circles. Do you see what I'm saying? So what did he do? God put him in a deep sleep, and he kind of played biblical prank, as I said. He took his spear, because Saul had his spear laying by his head, so he could just grab it, and he put a water jug there. Imagine trying to chuck a water jug. Think about that just a minute. You're going to get wet, they're going to get wet, and the thing's probably going to shatter, but nobody's going to die. So to me, that was a biblical prank. David wasn't living by what he had a right to do. David was living by what God was right to do. Now, 1 Samuel, we just read 1 through 12, because I'm going to jump some of these, because there's so much here to unpack. I was telling them that earlier, because I got the breakdown of this. So the situation couldn't have looked better. Saul was asleep. The army was asleep. Abner was asleep. David had Bathsheba with him. Saul's spear was right beside him. Boom. Here we are. Now, Matthew 5 and 44. I gave that to Uncle Gene. Uncle Gene, will you read your verse for me?
But I say unto you, love your enemies, bless them that curse you, do good to them that hate you, pray for them which despitefully use you and persecute you.
Now, think about this. David and Saul, for the first time, were thinking of enemies here. Okay? I mean, would you not think that even though David's not holding a grudge here, and David's not going to kill him, that Saul doesn't look at him as an enemy because Saul's trying to kill him? Sometimes in your life, you think things are great. You think you're good, cool with a friend or a person, and really they're holding something against you. Same scenario here. What's happening and plays out in your life is happening in the Bible. It's that simple. So, as Uncle Gene just read, love your enemies, bless those that curse you, and do good to them that hate you, and pray for those who despitefully use you and persecute you. Jesus did not say, do good to those who deserve it. Did you notice that? That wasn't in that verse. He said, love your enemies. And you see, David demonstrated the principle before Jesus even preached it right here. There will be times when somebody hurts you, and you get the opportunity to hurt them back. There will be times when you get able to expose people, like somebody could have embarrassed you. Somebody could have gotten even, and you've got a chance to get even or embarrass them back. Do you do that? Biblically, no. I know we've all done it. I've done it. I have. I've done it. But biblically, we're not supposed to. The biggest thing you need to ask yourself is, number one, can I? And if that follows with yes, the next thing you should ask is, should I? That's how simple it is. Slow down. Take a breath. count to 3. Can I get back at him? Yeah. Should I? Ooh. David could, but David wouldn't. Now, I want us to look at verse 13 through 20 here. In 1 Samuel 26, it says, Now David went over to the other side and stood on the top of a hill afar off, a great distance being between them. And David called out to the people and to Abner the son of Ner, saying, Do you not answer Abner? Then Abner answered and said, Who are you calling out to the king? So David said to Abner, Are you not a man, and who is like you in Israel? Why then have you not guarded your lord the king? For one of the people came in to destroy your lord the king. This thing that you have done is not good. As the Lord lives, you deserve to die, because you have not guarded your master, the Lord anointed. And now see where the king's spear is, and the jug of water was by his head. Then Saul knew David's voice and said, Is that your voice, my son David? Notice how the narrative changed quick there. David said, Is it my voice, my lord, O king? And he said, Why does my lord thus pursue his servant? For what have I done, or what evil is in my hand? Now therefore, please let my lord the king hear the words of his servant. If the Lord has stirred up against me, let him accept an offering. But if it's the children of men, may they be cursed before the Lord, for they have driven me out this day from sharing in the great inheritance of the Lord, saying, Go and serve other gods. So now do not let my blood fall to the earth before the face of the Lord, for the king of Israel has come out to seek a flea, as when one hunts a partridge in the mountain. Let me tell you what David's saying right there. The narrative changed pretty quick. And when I mean pretty quick, pretty quick. David yelled out into the mountains and he said, Hey, you that's supposed to be guarding the king's life. See, God cast a big sleep over him. He said, Hey, you that's guarding the king's life, you need to die. Guys like, why? Because you didn't guard your king. Somebody came in and infiltrated your camp. Now the king heard all this. When the king woke up and they noticed the spear was gone and there was a jug of water there, what do you think his first reaction was? His first knee-jerk reaction? I got an idea. Because, the Bible don't really explain emotions as far as, And then the king went, uh-oh, that don't happen. But I can guarantee you that's exactly what the king was thinking. Oh, me. I messed up. Because if you notice, the narrative changed real quick. When he said, It's my voice, my lord, O king, he said, Why does my lord pursue me? Because the king had turned around and said, Is that your voice, my son, David? Would you call somebody your son if you were going to kill him? You might call him son of but not your son. Do you see what I'm saying? Think about that. The king knew his goose was cooked. The king automatically recognized that his spear was gone and there's a jug of water sitting there. The king knew that God did not want him dead, but David showed great restraint. How many times in life do we have the opportunity to say, Hey, I'm in the right, you're in the wrong, but I ain't going to do nothing about it. Now, I'll be the first to admit, many times in my life when I said, I'm in the right, you're in the wrong, guess what? I'm going to just waylay you with my words and tell you how wrong you are. David didn't even do that. David just simply asked a question. Why are you trying to kill me? Again. In life, we have to start showing restraint. I had a great opportunity these past months to be able to learn restraint, learn humility, was shown a lot of grace, and learn to deal with regret. I told you that as I talked. In doing so, there would have been many times I could have had a knee-jerk reaction and just say, nope, you're right, I'm wrong, I'm gone. But instead, I stayed right in the moment. You see, sometimes God wants us to stay in the moment. He wants us to be present and say, okay, let me learn this lesson God wants me to learn. I'm right, you're wrong. How did we get here? Make sense? That's all David's asking the king. How did we get here? Now, I'd ask Mom to read Romans 12, 17 through 19, but I'm going to go ahead and read it for her. It says, well, wait a minute. Coda, can you look up Romans 12, 17 and 19 for me?
Recompense. Don't know that word. To no man evil for evil, provide things honest in the sight of all men. If it is possible, as much as lieth in you, live peaceably with all men. Dearly beloved, avenge not yourselves, but rather give place unto wrath, for it is written, vengeance is mine, I will repay, saith the Lord.
So you see, Paul gives us the same principle David's living by right here. David is living by what Paul has just wrote in these words. Vengeance is mine. That means there are some things we have to put in God's hands. You cannot control what somebody thinks about you. Point in case. 2 weeks ago, I had a beard down to here. As of 16 hours ago, I had a beard down to here. And now I have this. Clean shaven Joe that I've not seen in 20 years. You will not believe how many people has looked at me and said, I'm so glad you shaved that. That beard was ugly. Yeah, your mouth just dropped, didn't it? Now, if I was a worldly man, I would be like, oh, gee, thanks, you just hurt my feelings. But everybody's got their own opinions, okay? You don't know how many people has looked at me and said, man, you look younger. Miss Geneva was one of them, by the way. Today's her birthday. We've done some happy birthday. I had to come to terms with it, and I put it in God's hands. And I came to peace about it. And you see, that's how we're to live our life. We should not care what the world thinks of us. Only what God thinks. And I tell people, as long as I lay my head on my pillow at night and my God's happy with me, and I'm at peace with that, that's all that matters. If not, I'm going to continue to pray till I figure out why God's not happy with me. You can't control what somebody thinks about you. You can't control what people say about you. You cannot control somebody else's heart. You cannot force somebody to treat you fairly. But you can control what you do with what they did to you. What do I mean by that? We're almost done. Sometimes we spend so much energy to make somebody understand what side that we're on, we forget God already knows the whole story. Can I use you for an example? Sophie, you get mad at Savannah. You two clash heads. I ain't going to talk to you, you ain't going to talk to her. Dead silence. Days. Let's call it days. 4 days goes by, what happens? Sophie and Savannah pass, not a word said. Coda looks at him and says, what are y'all fighting about? And she looks at her and says, I don't remember. Has that ever happened? Thank you, Coda. At least I've got an honest one in that family. You forget. You let it drag out too long. The biggest thing I have found in this Bible that is not there is where it says time heals all wounds. You're a nurse. You're a nurse. What happens if you let a bad wound go untreated? Gets infected. Spiritually, you can get infected by letting time pass. Now, that don't mean don't let somebody cool off. Take time to pray. Take time to think. You can't fix everything right then, and that's something I had to learn. I wanted to fix it right then. But once you've had time to calm down, process, think, and pray, Don't go weeks. Don't go months. Take the time to say, hey, can we talk? And you see, that's what David's doing here with the king. He's wanting to talk. If God is your judge, you don't have to become the executioner, folks. That's what I'm saying. In any situation. Now, here we're talking about death and David killing Saul. But in life, no matter what happens, you don't have to be the executioner. People judge me all the time. They judge my actions. They judge how I live my life. Oh, you shouldn't do this. You shouldn't do that. I'm going, thank God it's not up to you. It took me a long time to get there. I have a friend that said, we need to get you out of work boots and put you in tennis shoes. I'm like, I have tennis shoes. I like tennis shoes. I'm a sneakerhead. You need to go with what's trending. Why do I care what's trending? That's just what I told them. They said that, oh, but it's the in fashion. I said, have you noticed me? I do not care about the in fashion. See, I worry about more of what's in here and how I treat people than I do what I'm wearing. True character is revealed when you have the power given to you. And this is how we're going to round this out. We're going to look at verse 21 through 25. Then Saul said, I have sinned. Return my son David, for I will harm you no more. Because my life was precious in your eyes this day. Indeed, I have played the fool and error exceedingly. And David answered and said, here is the king's spear. Let one of the young men come over and get it. May the Lord repay every man for his righteousness and his faithfulness. For the Lord delivered you into my hand today, but I would not stretch out my hands against the Lord's anointed. And indeed, as your life was valued much this day in my eyes, so let my life be valued much in the eyes of the Lord, and let him deliver me out of tribulation. Then Saul said to David, may you be blessed, my son David. You shall both do great things and also still prevail. So David went on his way, and Saul returned to his palace. Let me unpack real quick what happens here. Saul admits, I have sinned. Saul admits, I have played the fool. Anybody can be good when people are good to them. Anybody can be kind when somebody has treated them kindly. Okay? But character is revealed when you have the power to get even and choose not to. When the rubber meets the road and you're in the right and you have a chance to turn around and say, no, I'm going to do what you did to me. That's wrong. That's completely wrong. True character is when you can say, you've wronged me, I forgive you. Please don't do it again. Let's talk about it. See, Saul sat there and admitted what he did was wrong. You see, there's where David's heart shined, and that's where our hearts can shine. He doesn't win by killing Saul. He wins by refusing to kill Saul. So in your next battle, as we're going to call it, no matter what it is, take the time. What's going to win me this battle for the good? Sophie, are you going to cut Savannah down with your words when she cuts you down? Bella and Ruthie, are you going to take her horse and run away with it and never give it back, and then she's going to be mad at you? Or are you going to give it back when, time's right? Christian and Coda, I ain't picked on you yet. We accidentally back up and hit somebody's car, are we going to get mad about it?
Yes.
Why?
Because that happens way too often.
It does happen way too often. What lesson do we learn about that?
Your husband needs to go back to driving school.
Judge not lest ye should be judged, Miss Coda.
I have no record on my.
Take time, slow down, talk about it, is all I'm getting. I gotta pick on him a little, I love him. David had every human reason to take revenge, but he chose the other way. Ain't dang. Would you read your verse in Luke 6:27 and 28?
But I say unto you which hear, love thine enemies, do good to them which hate you, bless them that curse you, and pray for them which despitefully use you.
See, I said that again in Luke. Love your enemies. Pray for those who despitefully use you. Don't take into your own hands what you've already placed in God's hands. When somebody hurts you, do not let their behavior decide your character. When somebody attacks you, don't let hatred become hate in you. People are going to not like who you are. I promise you. People are not going to like your character. People are not going to like the fact that you go to church and you're a Christian. People are not going to like the fact, oh, trust me, you know how many times I've been told I'm going to die and go to hell because I sit under a woman pastor? Oh, yeah. Big deal. I can biblically knock that down in 5 minutes. Do I let that bother me? No. Why? At the end of the day, just like David, David was pleased in the eyes of God. At the end of the day, when I pray, I want to be pleasing in the eyes of God. When you're pleasing in the eyes of God, God will bless you. I am a firm believer in that. When you're able to say, I did that, I moved the spear and put a water jug there, I did wrong. Yeah, you got my attention. What do you want me to do now? I was that person. I'm not that person anymore. God will bless you. He knew what God had promised, but he was willing to wait for God's timing. He would rather wait for God's throne than to take it by bloodshed, and there's where we can bring this chapter into our lives. Sometimes faith isn't trusting God to give you what you want. Sometimes faith is trusting God enough not to take it when you can. That's true faith. So, like I said, this chapter was everywhere. And that's why I condensed it down. If you get anything out of this lesson today, all I ask you to get is this. Right or wrong, good or bad, leave it in God's hands. Have the faith enough to trust God to do the right thing when he tells you what. Now next week, I am still wrestling back and forth because we've got a short chapter about David and Asher, and then the Philistines will invade Israel again, and Saul will consult a medium. Now that's going to be a little wild thing to unpack. Same thing of what you're thinking today is what he's talking about back then. We may get into that. And then we're going to get into a big chapter, chapter 29. Chapter 29 is where the Philistines start to distrust David. The same people that were in the cave with David, the 400 that grew to 600 and then to 800, we're going to get where they don't trust. And we're going to talk about trust. And what is it like to trust? So we may be a few weeks in 29. So my suggestion, read all the way up to 29, because I won't be at 29 next week, but I'll be at somewhere between 27 and 29. But that's all I got for today.